This should be live. Let's see if it actually is. Da, 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 da. Any minute now. Okay. Brilliant. Just checking if the sound works. And then I think we can start. Brilliant. Well, welcome to Sticky Notes. It's been a while. Usually we try to have these every 2 weeks on a Friday at 12:30. Sometimes we take a little longer, but then we're back within the office. So without further ado, let's jump in. Sticky Notes is where one of us at the team at the User Story tells you about a topic of interest for a couple of minutes on a Friday lunch break. Because, I mean, reasonably, you don't really have anything better to do, right? So why not learn a little bit, for example, about notifications? Right. Notifications are very commonplace in our lives today, but I'd like to take a little step back and dissect them a little bit. So their purpose is generally as a memory aid and or to promote action, meaning we prevent having to learn things and reduce our general cognitive effort in trying to keep things in mind. And we try to give some context to ourselves at a particular time to enable a quick decision. Their properties are generally, we can generally pull them into 4 different categories. They are cognitively intrusive to gain our attention. Ideally, they are relevant, meaning they're either time sensitive or contextual. Go a bit more into that later. Hopefully they're concise and actionable as well. And they are generally made up of 2 parts. There is a notifier and there is the information that goes along with it. So the notifier can be audible, visible, or haptic. Visual notifiers can be things like blinking lights, banners, bubbles, indicators. Audio or audible notifiers can be things like notification sounds, your phone ringing, alarms, and all of the sort. And a haptic notifier could be, for example, the vibration of your mobile phone. Whereas information can be generally is generally what we try to use and help our memory. So there is 2 kinds of memory that we tend to sort of distinguish between. There is memory in the mind and there is memory in the world. And every kind of notification tends to fall somewhere along that spectrum. So on the far right, we have memory in the mind. This is something that we need to remember and need to recall. For example, in terms of a notification, this might be the knot in the handkerchief. But if you are sort of attentive and you actually do use your handkerchief and find the knot, then hopefully it will help you remember what you were thinking about at the time when you tied the knot in your handkerchief. making it very annoying and hard to use for yourself in the future. Somewhere in the middle of the way, there's things like sirens. Sirens do rely on us remembering things for the most part, but they are typically placed in context, and they can, by, for example, different sound patterns, convey more information as well. So when you hear a siren, typically, depending on where you are, you can tell, is it a fire alarm? Is it sort of a warning signal that a train is coming through the station? All sorts of things like that. So that is the contextual information of the alarm, siren, or notification. Whereas for example, disaster alarms, there are different patterns for different types of disaster, and we have to sort of remember and recall those, but they are giving us more information in theory if we have learned them ahead of time. And memory in the world are things that exist that we can draw upon. This can be things like notification on our phones, most notably, with hopefully a title and a description that makes sense to us. It can be sticky notes that we place around our monitor. These sorts of things, just written things. A book could be one of an example of this as well, where if we remember it by getting a notifier of it, it can also present the information of a notification. So this, hold up, there we go. This takes us to the wider considerations around sort of notifications. So there's usually one of two motivations for a notification. Is either to relay information, or it is to drive engagement, build habits, or promote an action. And the drivers for this can either be scheduled, be it a fixed or relative schedule. So for example, a fixed schedule would be a notification for sticky notes at 12:30 on a Friday. Or relative one could be that I left my car door open, and in about 5 seconds, it'll start reminding me that I left the light on. In an event-driven notification can be anything from a third-party action, like somebody sent you a message, through location, you've arrived at work, do you want to check in, start your timer, to things like environmental measurements, like maybe the air quality is not particularly good today, and you'll be reminded of that. It can also be driven by relevance or urgency. This is typically the case for alarms, for example. Now, the implementation, particularly for notifications on our computers and phones, sorry. There we go. So the notifications on our computers and phones particularly can be directed through different channels. So we might have filters for work-related, life-related notifications. We have do not disturb filters to kind of dial down which notifications we see where, so we only get those that are relevant to us, and hold those back that will be relevant to us when we have the time to actually focus on them and action them. There are, for example, alerting and silent notifications as well that we can set up depending on their urgency. And generally, different notification types. What comes to mind, for example, are just ringing notifications. There are banners, there are bubbles that you can interact with, all of these different types. And there are particularly also a couple of pitfalls when it comes to implementing them in your products and services. One of them is probably familiar to all of us, which is oversaturation. We get loads and absolute loads of notifications, and the more we get, the more they desensitize us, essentially, and it's more likely that we miss them. And particular culprits in this are just services that send too many notifications of the same type in quick succession. So kind of the cadence of them. There is frequently an exaggerated urgency to them, which makes users, or us in general, trust them less. And it also, just the amount of notifications dilutes the actually important ones, making us more likely to miss those amongst the sea of just garble that we have to filter through. Solutions to this are available and can also be developed by ourselves. Some of them are sort of on the operating system level. For example, we can select notification styles for particular services. We can set them to be either alerting or silent, as mentioned earlier, allow different categories of notifications, even where you can, for example, in a good app anyway, select if you want general notifications, if you want them for messages, if you want them for reminders of things. And there's a host of different categories which you can choose from in order to customize the notifications to your personal habits and needs. A very good example of this is Instagram, for example, which has a whole bunch of different filters. I encourage you, if you use Instagram, to go into the notification settings and see for yourselves that there is a very wide variety. And what other services do as well, for example, Duolingo does this, is measure individual engagement with notifications. So Duolingo will send you daily reminders to just kind of do your daily lessons, make sure to keep on learning a language. But if you don't actually interact with these to open the app, they will first start sending them maybe every other day, once a week, and then eventually they'll send you one last notification telling you that they will actually stop sending them to you because they're not working, because you're clearly not paying attention to them, and thus there is no need for them to clutter your notification tray, which is good. It's also a little bit cheeky word. It is a bit of a retaining strategy, but at large, I very much condone that behavior for notifications as well. And I think this is one of the more constructive ways to leverage user data. And another way to resolve sort of the flood is to group similar notifications. Most, if not all, email apps, for example, do that, where for each email you get a quick notification at the time, but they will actually group them together in the same tray, only show you the most recent, however many they want you to see, and hide the rest, give you a little indicator of how many there are in total. Another one, another pitfall with notifications, or another problem that there is frequently, are deceptive patterns. I know they come up a lot. We keep harping on about them. But there are, for example, patterns of random reward with things like flash sale notifications to keep users engaged with notifications from shopping apps, for example. I mean, Adidas does it, Nike does it. Just to name two, they all have essentially app versions of their online stores, and they will send you notifications. Now, every so often you will get a notification for a really good offer or a really good sale, but for the most part, this just essentially keeps you having the notifications turned on, and the vast majority of their notifications are just regular promotional messages, essentially, that come through into your notification tray and make it act essentially as a billboard for them. Another one is that clickbait strategies have also made it through into notifications. So there's particularly around topics like finance, which may also be leveraged by some neobanks or fintech companies. Anything around fear in the news or fear of missing out even. They are all leveraged to drive engagement with notifications, as well as things like just using emojis in them to which measurably drives interaction rate as well. And ultimately, all this does is just increase cognitive load on the users, wear them out, and over time make notifications less effective for everyone. Right, that is my sticky note on notifications. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you have any questions, I'm afraid I can't see any in chat right now. We will be back in 2 weeks, pinky promise, this time for reals. And yeah, tell your friends, tell anyone who might be interested in these, that every other week, 12:30 on a Friday, we will be talking about a little bit that we learned about, found out, think about in our regular work lives, or even just outside of work, if it might be vaguely interesting to our profession. Right, I can't see any questions, so thank you very much, and I'll see you in 2 weeks.